Alright, good morning everybody. My name is Marian and I will give you a short introduction about running behavioral studies online, especially in perception and attentional studies, but in all cognitive psychology mostly. Alright, so the first question obviously is why do we run studies online? One of the answers is pretty simple. Because of the ongoing virus pandemic, most labs are still closed. But there are also other reasons, really positive reasons, not only negative. So what is good about running studies online? The first idea is that we can easily recruit large and very diverse samples, which is not really possible in normal lab situations. Because what we do when we recruit locally at our university is obviously we only get local students. And mostly they are of the same age and they have this weird characteristic that you know. So Western educated, industrialized, rich and democratic. Most of them anyway. Not all of them obviously, but the majority has these characteristics. And online studies can really help us here to diversify our sample through different cultures even, and get a large sample without the need to basically care for every individual participant. So the data collection is really efficient as well. Once you have set up your experiment, you just distribute the link and answer sometimes a question somebody has about the experiment, but in general, nothing you need to do. Then of course, one thing that is often overlooked is that online experiments provide you a large reach, which may mean that you can reach experts and patients of specific domains more easily. In clinical settings, you can think of patients that are somewhere across the world, but they fall into your specific category of interest, but you cannot really go there because it's too far away and too expensive, or not feasible for them to come to your lab. So what you can do then is do online experiments with them, and this really helps you to get a lot of experts and a lot of patients throughout the whole world. Now, if we don't think about only the why of doing experiments, but also the how of doing experiments. If you are really starting up with this only, then you don't have much of a clue of how you can basically do your studies online. The general flow is the same as in typical lab studies. So what we have is the researcher, which is us. And what we do is we use some sort of tool to create an experiment. In the lab, these are there's a large variety of tools available, but online this is even exaggerated. So there are many tools available to create online experiments. So then you create your experiment and you need to host it somewhere, because if you run it on your lab computer, nobody can access it from the internet. So you need to host it on a specialized server, which we call online host here in this case. Then at the same time of basically programming and setting up your experiment, what you also do is setting up some kind of recruitment platform, or at least some kind of recruitment management system. Through this one, the participants get links to participate on your experiment, which is hosted on the online host. So basically what you do is use your experiment builder to create the experiment, put it on the host. Then what you need to do is select how you want to share the experiment online, which is mostly just through a link, and then you share it either in specialized subject panels or just on your own mailing list, social media, depending on what kind of participants you want, of course. And then they participate and all the data gets collected on your online host, and you can basically download the data from there. So how do we choose from the vast variety of tools that there are? And the answer is really simple. It depends, of course. Generally, you will need 3 tools. Sometimes you only need 2. Because one thing which is definitely the case is you need some kind of program or helping or a system to program your experiment. What you also need is somewhere to host the experiment. What you may sometimes need is a recruitment platform, but not necessarily. There are also some tools available that combine all of these services in one tool, which we called full service platforms. And as I said before, there is a large variety of tools available. And it's not easy to choose which one is adapted to your needs perfectly. So the first thing what you need to think about is, what do I need? What features do I need? And how do I want to set this up? So in our article on online experiments, we have created a small table with an overview of some features and an overview of some of these tools. Since then, there's a couple of tools new on the market, which so the article is from April, sorry. And since then, there's a couple of more tools which have gone on the market. So it's not a full list, obviously. But we basically not all tools are combinable with each other. So what we have in this table is a slight overview of integrated service providers, experiment builders, host and study management system, and recruitment services, and some ideas about how they perfectly interact with each other. For example, the experiment builder JS Psych works perfectly with the recruitment platform mTurk or Amazon Mechanical Turk. So now the question is not only which tool you choose, but depends obviously on how much effort you want to put in yourself. Do you want to have a lot of flexibility, but you don't have any clue about programming? This is possible. But then again, you can also have a programming heavy solution, which gets you even more flexibility. Or you say, okay, I just need some basic features, but I want it to be pretty simple. So there are tools available for everything. And this is basically the benefit that there is in online experiments. Once you tested out a tool and get to know a tool, it's easy, comparably, to switch to another tool. Because in offline experiments, we have, they're often programmed in very inflexible point and click interfaces or combined them with weird scripts. Some are programmed in Python, some are programmed in C++, some are programmed in Java, and well, some have some kind of proprietary complications, which is also called MATLAB. In online experiments, this is much easier because the backend to all of these solutions is JavaScript, and that's it. So if you started programming a little bit of JavaScript, which from syntax perspective is similar to Python, a little bit at least, please don't hate me if you're a programmer, then you really have an easy way of adapting to different tools and solutions. And here I created some kind of a graph, a 2-dimensional one, about the programming focus. So the focus about programming on the left, and clicking or interface focused on the right. And on the top we have flexible solutions, and on the bottom we have inflexible or feature scarce solutions. This is obviously a pretty subjective view, and this is a personal one created by me. This is not an objective classification of online tools. So it might be that an inflexible solution is perfectly viable for your use case. But I want to point out some examples. For example, if you want to go really clicking heavy, so you don't want to program anything, but you still want a lot of features available, you could go for one of these paid services, which is Gorilla or LabVanced. which you pay a monthly fee or something like this, and then they give you access to their platform, and you can program all experiments and download the data directly from their platform. So they combine experiment builder and online hosting solution. So slightly more programming focused are solutions like OpenSesame and PsychoPy, which are both pretty often used, especially PsychoPy in combination with the online hosting solution, which is Pavlovia. So, but there are also other tools. For example, SimplePhi is a pretty new one, which is was originally created for perception experiments and does not offer many features, but the author says this is their feature. So our feature is to not offer many features, to make it as simple as possible. And it's really not that complicated to set up an experiment with SimplePhi. Obviously, you can go pretty flexible and pretty programming heavy if you want. So if you program your experiment in base JavaScript, then you have all the flexibility the web offers for you, but you might also need a lot of programming skills. So my first suggestion is I called it cheap and private, because it's cheap because, well, it doesn't cost much money. It only costs for recruiting participants. If you do that on your own, so if you distribute your links to the experiment yourself, then it doesn't cost anything. OpenSesame is basically medium ground between programming and clicking. If your experiment, or especially your visual stimulus displays, are not that complex, then you get around without programming anything at all. And if you put these studies, they can directly be exported to JTOS, which is a study hosting system which runs on your own web server or your own university server. And this is pretty cool, especially if you have data privacy issues, right? So if you're in the European Union, you cannot use services that are, for example, situated in the USA most of the time. So this is good because the sensible participant data always stays at your university. So this is a great solution. And you might combine this with the participant recruitment platform Prolific, which then obviously costs money. But if you are in need of diverse, fast participant set, then you can recruit through Prolific. So the all-rounder, which is, I guess, as a combination of tools most often used, is PsychoPy and Pavlovia, which is because PsychoPy just offers a general export function within the PsychoPy builder to host stuff on Pavlovia. This is called the all-rounder because it's often used. There are many resources available, and there are tutorial videos and some workshops, and it's in quite active development. However, Pavlovia costs a monthly fee or a per subject fee. What you also could do is the love, peace, and money combo, which I called it, which basically uses Gorilla for experiment programming and hosting, but it's a paid service. I think it costs around €1 per participant. But you still need to take care of recruiting participants yourself. On the plus side, this might be good for students because you don't really need any programming at all. You just use their point and click interface, and they have a pretty large library of tasks already available that you can import into your own experiment. And so it's a really easy start to getting studies online. So one thing that's really important in building experiments is that your instructions are extremely clear and vivid. So keep away from doing just plain text. But what you should do is basically a step-by-step instruction of how your task works and what the participants are supposed to do. This is really important because participant sets are often more diverse than they are in your lab. And you need to keep in mind that participants cannot ask questions because you're not there. Then it's important that you provide feedback throughout the experiment, both about the duration of the experiment and about how they're performing. Participants in online studies want to know whether they're good or bad, and this is an easy way to keep their motivation up. For some experiments, it might be interesting to probe the attention and to punish errors. If you do, for example, 2 alternative forced choice tasks, this is trivial because you measure errors anyway. And if participants do some errors, what you could, for example, do is delay the next trial if they're doing an error. Because what that means is the more errors they do, the longer it takes. And for participants, especially participants that get a fixed payment, this is really not viable. So they will start participating in a good manner pretty soon. One thing that you also need to keep in mind compared to classical lab experiments, which are often many hundreds of trials or thousands sometimes, you need to keep the experiment short. I'm not aware of scientific investigations into this, but my personal anecdotal experience has told me that after 10 to maximally 15 minutes, data quality drops significantly. So what you should do is keep your experiments as short as possible. So like 10 minutes tops would be great. 10, 12 minutes is like at the maximum range for an online experiment. Best practices for hosting experiments. First of all, consider that you run it on an online host that obviously doesn't crash down if 20 participants participate at the same time. This should be true for most experiments. And then also make your experiment accessible from everywhere, not just from within the university or within the country. So if you want to do an online experiment, think about programming it in English, or even think about programming it in different languages like English, Spanish, and if you can speak it, Chinese would be great, of course. Consider open materials. This is just a best practice because I feel that the whole community in especially vision sciences, but all other cognitive psychology areas as well, could benefit massively from sharing their own material, their own experimental codes on platforms like GitHub or on personal websites or wherever. But it's really important that not everybody has to solve all of the problems themselves. And most of the problems are solved in classical experiments. And then, of course, think about data privacy, which is extremely important if you're in the European Union, which I think most of you are. All right, some last slide about best practice for recruiting participants. You need to make sure to select reliable participants because obviously you don't want bots or dogs to participate in your experiment. For this, one thing is you should pay fairly, but obviously you need some kind of a check of whether participants participate in a manner that you would intend, that they follow the instructions. This one thing would, for example, be, as I told you before, to punish errors. You can also, if you're using recruitment platforms like Prolific or Cloud Research or Amazon Mechanical Turk, you can select participants based on their performance on the platform. So you can basically trade off participant quality for the duration your experiment takes. If you, for example, only take the 95% most reliable participants, then it takes a longer time than compared to if you take the top, 30% or something. Then pay fairly. And I think it's really great if you consider bonuses for good performance, which is also a motivational issue that's really cool. And important, and I want to stress this, really important for online experiments is watching the dropout rate, recording the dropout rate, and analyzing the dropout rate after the experiments. Because many people in the past who carried out online experiments did not do this. And in the last years, and I have some great resources linked in the article, in the last years it was becoming evident that in online experiments, and this is also my personal experience, that in online experiments you have around a dropout rate of around, 70 to 75%. So most people will start your instructions, but then close the experiment immediately. And if those people always are always part of one specific condition of the experiment, then this can create some trouble for interpretation of your data. That is all. Thank you very much. If you're interested in more content like this, especially about online experimental design and possibly analysis, make sure to subscribe to the channel.